Every empire acts as if it has reinvented money, but all of them eventually learn the same lesson. Money has its own laws, and those laws don't care about politics, promises, or optimism. These rules aren't written in constitutions. They aren't taught in schools either. They've been discovered, forgotten, and rediscovered through centuries of crises. If you don't know these laws, you'll never understand why the system always seems to work against you. Today, we'll uncover these forgotten laws of money, buried in the dusty pages of history. From the silver coins that lost their value in ancient Rome to the digital tricks of modern central banks. This is their story. And as you'll see, the game was never fair to begin with. Let's begin with the most basic and ruthless rule, Gresham's Law. In the 1500s, Sir Thomas Gresham explained this principle to Queen Elizabeth I with a single line: bad money drives out good. The logic is simple. If two kinds of currencies circulate at the same time, one trusted, the other debased, people will spend the bad money and hoard the good. Take ancient Rome, for example. When the silver denarius was gradually mixed with copper and other cheap metals, the people weren't fools. They paid their taxes and debts with the new, low-quality coins, and secretly hid away the old, pure silver ones. The same thing happened across medieval Europe. When kings clipped their coins or replaced gold with copper, people adapted instantly. The result was always the same. Bad money filled the market, while good money disappeared into safes. And once that cycle began, trust in money started to collapse. But the story doesn't end there. There's another law, almost the evil twin of Gresham's, called Thiers' Law. Named after Adolphe Thiers of 19th century France, this rule says, in moments of true collapse, the balance reverses. In crisis, good money drives out bad. Think of Weimar Germany in the 1920s. Bakeries demanded wheelbarrows full of banknotes for a single loaf of bread. Prices doubled every few days. No one wanted to hold the mark even for a second. People fled to dollars, gold, cigarettes, or barter, anything that still held value. The same scene repeated itself in Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and dozens of other countries. Gresham's Law describes the slow decay of money. Thiers' Law describes its sudden death. So what happens in the gray zone between slow decay and total collapse? That's where the Cantillon Effect takes over. In the early 18th century, the Irish-French economist Richard Cantillon noticed something crucial. When new money enters the economy, it doesn't reach everyone equally. Those closest to the source governments, banks, the elites, spend it first. By the time it reaches ordinary people, prices have already gone up. The early receivers buy goods and assets at yesterday's prices. The late receivers are forced to pay tomorrow's. That's why money printing always enriches the rich and impoverishes the rest. After the 2008 crisis, quantitative easing sent stock markets soaring while wages stayed frozen. During the pandemic, stimulus checks vanished into rising grocery and housing costs. Inflation isn't just a number, it's a transfer of wealth, and most of the time, you're on the losing side. Here lies the system's cruelty. It funnels benefits upward while hiding the cost under rising prices. People feel robbed but can't see the thief. The Cantillon Effect is the hidden mechanism of the modern financial system, and it's been running since the first coin was ever minted. The rich don't just earn more, they literally receive money differently. At this point, a new law is about to enter the stage: financial repression, the invisible cage governments built to ensure people can never truly escape the system. The concept of financial repression emerged after World War II. At that time, countries were crushed under mountains of debt and had no easy way to pay them back. Raising taxes would have sparked revolt. Defaulting would have destroyed credibility. So they found another method: lock citizens inside the system and quietly erode their wealth. How did this work? Central banks kept interest rates artificially low, often below inflation. That meant the money in your savings account lost value in real terms every year. At the same time, laws restricting capital flows were introduced. People couldn't easily move their money abroad or switch into gold or other alternative assets. Citizens were trapped in a world of negative real returns. Governments, meanwhile, quietly burned down their debts. There was no visible tax, but the money taken from your pocket had a name: inflation. It was the quietest and one of the most effective taxes in history. Fast forward to today, and the picture hasn't changed. After the 2008 global crisis, interest rates fell to near zero and stayed there for more than a decade. Savers suffered trillions in real losses, while stocks and property smashed records. In short, those with capital got richer. Those who saved lost out. Between 2020 and 2021, rates collapsed again. This time, ordinary people watched their savings shrink as food and housing prices skyrocketed. It wasn't an accident. It was financial repression, adapted for the 21st century. And government's greatest advantage was this: most people didn't even notice. They only felt, why am I poorer? The answer lay hidden inside the system. But these laws don't only apply to individuals. Some operate at the scale of empires. That brings us to Triffin's paradox, the reserve currency trap. In the 1960s, Belgian-born American economist Robert Triffin warned the U.S. Congress of a fatal flaw at the heart of the Bretton Woods system. If the U.S. dollar was to be the world's reserve currency, the United States would need to supply enough dollars to finance global trade. That meant running persistent trade deficits, spending more abroad than it earned, so the rest of the world could obtain liquidity. In the short term, this worked. The world trusted the dollar and trade expanded. But in the long run, the system's foundations weakened. As the number of dollars in circulation grew, the link to gold weakened and trust frayed. Triffin's warning came true in 1971. Richard Nixon ended the gold standard and turned the dollar into pure fiat. Since then, the U.S. has run chronic current account deficits. Production moved offshore while dollars kept being printed. Factories closed, debts rose. Yet the dollar's global dominance kept the game alive. The paradox is brutal. To remain the world's reserve currency, a country must undermine its own economy. It's an inevitable law of decay. We see the consequences today. America consumes more than it produces. It lives under a debt-funded illusion of prosperity. The dollar's supremacy strengthens Wall Street while hollowing out Main Street. And challengers are now circling. China, Russia, the BRICS countries. They're exploring alternatives. Central banks are hoarding gold at the fastest pace in 50 years. The dollar's empire carries the seeds of its own decline. So we can summarize Triffin's paradox like this: reserve money is both crown and curse. If Triffin explains why the system jams, Goodhart's law explains why attempts to fix it often make things worse. In the 1970s, economist Charles Goodhart noticed a simple but devastating truth. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. States and central banks worship numbers: 2% inflation, 5% unemployment, 3% growth. But once those figures are used to manipulate outcomes, rather than simply describe reality, the economy itself becomes an instrument of measurement, and the measurement loses meaning. But when politicians decide to hit those targets at all costs, they begin to distort the system itself. Take inflation targeting, for example. For decades, central banks promised to keep inflation at 2%. Sounds reasonable, right? But to hit that number, they manipulated interest rates, flooded markets with liquidity, and inflated asset bubbles. On paper, inflation stayed low, but in reality, housing, healthcare, and education costs exploded. The official figures said stability, while real life screamed chaos. Or think about GDP. Politicians worship it like a symbol of national pride. But when growth itself became the goal, the system began to rot. Governments piled on debt, outsourced industries, and inflated financial bubbles just to keep the number moving upward. The result? Prosperity on paper, fragility in reality. Goodhart's law exposes the trap perfectly. Once you start managing the numbers, you stop measuring the truth. And now we arrive at the final law of our journey, the law of diminishing returns on debt. It may not sound poetic, but it's the harshest truth of our time. In the early stages of growth, debt accelerates progress. Borrow $1, gain $1, maybe even more in GDP. But as debt multiplies, its payoff shrinks. Soon, $1 of new debt buys only 50 cents of growth, then 25, then almost nothing. At some point, debt keeps climbing while the economy stands still. The machine no longer speeds up, it simply groans under its own weight. And that's where we are today. U.S. debt has surpassed $30 trillion. Each new wave of borrowing no longer creates real wealth. It merely props up markets, funds welfare programs, and keeps the illusion alive. But math doesn't lie. Debt saturation is the final stage every empire reaches. Rome debased its coins when expansion stalled. France drowned in debt before 1789. Britain lost its empire after 2 world wars under the weight of its own liabilities. And now, the same reckoning stands before America. The law is merciless. Debt doesn't save you. It only buys time. So what do all these laws teach us? That money might look like magic, but it's governed by rules as unbreakable as gravity. Bad money drives out good. Crises push people toward sound assets. Newly printed money reaches the rich first and the poor last. Governments suppress citizens to quietly erase their debts. Reserve currencies decay under their own power. Numbers hide the truth. And in the end, debt consumes itself. These aren't academic theories, they're survival codes. They explain why inflation robs savers, why wages never catch up, why you struggle under debt while Wall Street breaks records, why nations rise on trust and fall on leverage. These are not random events. They are the rhythm of financial history. And here's the hardest truth. This game was never designed for you to win. Ordinary people live under transparency. Elites live under secrecy. You pay taxes, they hide wealth. You earn wages, they receive money first. Your cash loses value, their assets rise. The system follows its own laws, and unless you learn them, you'll always play blind. History doesn't repeat, but money always obeys its laws. And if you don't understand them, one day they'll crush you too. If this helped you see money and history in a new light, hit subscribe. The answers are out there, and I'll help you find them.